And so then he asks about judgmatical. Is this word judgmatical a common word among the less read English, and has it passed over to the U.S., or is it Irish? Another case where he looks for an origin, and comments here are quite interesting. In 19, the word fogey. Old fogey, sometimes written foggy, I suppose from fog, meaning cloudy-headed, is a word used by the young democracy of the U.S. against their superiors in Asian experience. I never met this word before 1851. Professor Reynolds tells me that old Scottish people in Charleston frequently use the term fogey for what would be in German philister. A merchant sticking to old heavy ways and methods will thus be called fogey. And then he states something he wrote, there's no doubt in my mind that fogey is one of those many words which center, as it were, upon themselves several etymologies. They have sprung from different roots at several places, and coming to mean similar things, they ultimately form but one word used in pretty much the same sense over the whole district of the various origins. So this is almost like a multiple causation, so on. Okay, let's move on then to some list of, in 22 to 44, these are words that for the most part are known Southernisms. And again, by known Southernisms, I can find references to them as Southernisms in Dare or in Carver or in other sources. So in 22, you have favoring to mean look like, which Lieber notes. Is favoring for look like merely American or Old English or provincial English? In America, it is used both in the North and in the South, perhaps in the South more. This meaning of favor for look like is listed as a Southernism in Dare, with the earliest relevant reference to about 1887, and it's also mentioned by Carver as a South 2 feature. Evening in 23 to mean afternoon. Lieber states, all over the South, evening means after dinner. They say, I'll come to see you this evening at 2 o'clock. This is very inconvenient. Evening they would call night, 7 o'clock at night, i.e. 7 o'clock in the evening. And evening, meaning afternoon, is mentioned by there as chiefly a southern feature and South Midlands, and also is mentioned in Carver. There's no relevant reference in Dare before 1875. And there are some other Southernisms here that I'll skip. In 28, this 28 is sort of interesting. Bar, mosquito bar. Lieber writes about this term. This is a common American term for mosquito net, at least in the U.S. In the West Indies, I believe they use the latter term, net. I found at least all the English in St. Thomas, Puerto Rico, etc. use mosquito net, but I've not been to Jamaica. Here in the South, the word bar alone is used in all cases in which both parties know that no other bar can be met. And what's interesting about this is that in the discussion in Dare about bar meaning mosquito bar, it assigns the term to Louisiana and other areas of French settlement. So this is quite different than Lieber's understanding of the term. Another kind of case where there's a different isogloss is in 29, stake and rider fence. So Lieber's entry for stake and rider fence is the name given here in South Carolina and perhaps everywhere further south to the fence called in Virginia and further north, the worm fence. This is interesting because Carver 87 says gives stake and rider as a term exclusively of the lower north. So maybe there's an isogloss shift. There's some other interesting entries here I'll skip. Volunteer as a volunteer plant. If you read this, it may give a different meaning. Perhaps the volunteer state has a different origin than what we think in 31, if you read that. He has a couple references to tote. In the end of 32, he notes it as a verb neuter that, something like he once towed it into a village tavern, and he was surprised that it could be used like that. I don't know if in current Southern English it is used like that. He towed it into a tavern. 33 and 34 are interesting because I'm not familiar with whether these are still used. Rise. How do you rise for how do you do is a common expression in the upper part of South Carolina, perhaps the whole state in a wider extent. 34 is a Cherokee word, soke, the Cherokee name for a dish of soft corn and peas boiled together, and which according to Webster is called a succotash. The whites in Georgia near the Cherokees use likewise the term soke. I don't find that in der. Then there's some very early references to certain terms, like in 38, Dodi. Lieber has the earliest reference to this term. It predates what's in der OED. Dodi in 38 is a very common expression here for spongy rottenness inside a tree among common white people and Negroes. And this is listed by both Carver and der as being a southern term, with the earliest reference to 1883. Gibby in 39, Gibby weather means here in the eastern south, moist, warm weather, growing weather. I do not know how far the word extends. This word is given in der as South Atlantic and Mid-Atlantic. The interesting term in 42, Frenching, and this is one of the earliest references to this word. It's listed in der. Frenching, this is a curious word. Mr. Brumby tells me that it is common in Florida to say a field Frenches cotton or corn when the plant promises well, but at certain periods becomes poor and dies owing to the soil. Okay, and then there are some comments he makes on page that I have at the beginning of page 4 on grammar that I'll just skip. He does have instances of the odd prefixing every now and then. So there's a nice example in 45, to go a-catting, meaning whatever you undertake to do, you do that, nothing else. When I go a-catting, I go a-catting. There's also, he has a reference to like to, in the sense of almost. He had liked to be shot, or he was on the point of, or in a hair's breadth of being shot, or very near. There's some comments on the imperfect instead of the past and undone that I will skip, owing for time. There are one or two more references. He has a whole bunch of references about terms for people. So something like, he has a reference about what he sees what a Creole is. So in Louisiana, Creole means native, no matter whether man, animal, or thing, white, mixed, or black. They speak there of Creole ladies, Creole lawyers, Creole Negroes, Creole cane, Creole mules, etc., etc. Servant. Okay. Servant means here always a slave and is preferred by whites of color to slave, etc. He has a very interesting, or kind of, I don't know, almost humorous rendition of a cracker. This is in number 53. Cracker, sandhill cracker, sandhiller. And I'll just read this quickly. There is in the southern states a peculiar species of population of white men, squatters, that is unauthorized settlers, on pine lands of little value. They are called by way of contempt crackers, etc. Some of them may very well be called the savages in the midst of civilization. They generally have a miserable horse or harness, a cow to their pitiful little cart, on which they bring a puny load of wood stolen from the forest around them to town. I have seen boys and men riding such cows harnessed to the cart. They are sallow, even greenish, live upon whiskey and stolen hogs or callow, and mostly live without fear of God or man. Very many of them cohabit promiscuously, changing concubines, and cases of fearful incest have occurred. I have known them. A stone jug is invariably dangling under the cart. In it they take the whiskey from town, which they buy from the money they get for their wood. Often have I seen their children as drunk as their parents. Here's a field for missionaries instead of the distant countries of the East. Okay, and then one last thing that is a term that I didn't know in 57, buried Jew. In this region, Columbia, Camden, South Carolina, I do not know to what further extent, buried Jew means in common parlance what the Germans call baptized Jew, that is Christians who have been Jews. The difficulty arising out of the fact that Jew has a double meaning of religion and national descent, and that while one can be changed, the other remains still to be designated, is felt everywhere. In Germany, however, it ought to be added that a desire at least existed illiberally to designate the baptized Jews by way of contempt, which neither in France, England, nor here exists. So to conclude, what I try to do here is to make known Lieber's unpublished Americanisms, Anglicisms, etc., and that it can constitute sort of an interesting source for the early history of Southern English. Thank you.